Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and ITWire.com video interview. Today, I'm joined by Coby Hanoch. He is the CEO of Weebit Nano, which is creating next generation memory tech. We're going to learn all about it. Welcome to the program.
Hi.
So let's start at the beginning. And Coby, can you please, before we get onto the company, can you please tell us a little bit about your history in the world of tech?
Well, I guess I've been around semiconductors for almost 40 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated from the Israeli Institute of Technology in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Worked for, I guess, about 11 years at National Semiconductor, developing processors. Went to France. I worked on a supercomputer project there and came back to Israel. Basically about 15, 16 years of engineering.
Mm-hmm.
When I started a company together with 4 friends called Vericity. It was in the verification space, the semiconductor verification.
Yeah.
And then that's when I switched to the business side. So I became VP sales there, basically ran around the world opening offices everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
10 years later, we sold the company off. And I didn't stick around. Cadence acquired us. I didn't stick around there very much.
Mm-hmm.
One of the investors asked me to try to help him with a company that was going bankrupt. So I took that company, put it back on its feet.
Yep.
Then I became a consultant. Basically, in the last 10 years, I was a consultant helping startups define their sales strategy, setting up their worldwide sales presence.
Yeah.
I was involved in another, I guess, maybe bigger exit for a company called Jasper.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Weebit approached me originally to join the board. And then when the previous CEO said he wants to step down for personal reasons, here I am.
So that leads us to Weebit Nano. I mean, it sounds like something from a Nintendo game, but it's much more interesting than that. Tell us about Weebit Nano and the next generation memory.
Well, Weebit is a very exciting company. The computer domain is really undergoing massive changes recently, artificial intelligence and all. And all of these things require a lot of memory.
Yeah.
So, when the world was looking at the existing technologies, they've been around for a long time and they're just not good enough when you move forward. So quite a few companies actually started looking at different types of new technologies. I think resistive RAM, ReRAM, which is what we're doing, is recognized as one of the leading, if not the leader, potential for future memory. And Weebit started 3 years ago, based on patents that we licensed from Rice University from Professor James Tour. We then took that technology to a research fab. So when you're talking about semiconductors, you need fabrication facilities, which are very expensive to set up, billions of dollars. They're very complex. We found a great partner in France called Leti, and we partnered with them to produce or to develop this technology. We've been making very good progress on that side. In parallel, we needed funding, and I guess back in those days, it was difficult to find funding for technology for semiconductor companies. Everyone wanted cyber and whatever software type companies.
Sure, the latest
we ended up coming to Australia. One of the investors, original founders of the company, had contacts in Australia. And to cut the story short, we did a reverse merge, and we're a publicly traded company here.
And that's why you're on the ASX as opposed to NASDAQ or something else?
Basically, it was, I guess it was a combination of the personal contacts and situation, and we're very happy to be here.
Now, people know about memory as both RAM for the computers, how many gigabytes of RAM your computer has to think, and then storage. We have gone from old-fashioned hard disk to solid-state storage much faster, and people are very used to their iPhones having 64, 128, 256, 512 gigabytes of storage. So is your technology used for storage and for RAM? Both separate? And how does it differ from the SDRAM or the other types of memory that are in use today? What's the revolution?
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think memory and storage are terms that people confuse sometimes, and there are different types of memory and storage. It's mostly the way that they're used.
Yeah.
So you have, starting with the very, very fast memories that are the SRAM or the DRAM, which are used, they're sitting very close to the processor.
Yeah.
The issue with them, they're very fast, they're great, but
they're volatile. So when you turn the power off,
exactly,
everything's gone.
Everything's gone. And you want to have non-volatile memory. Non-volatile memory traditionally has been much slower, and so it's been used more for storage, like your USB stick or your SSD, and that's basically called flash technology. So you have those two main types of memory. The thing about ReRAM is it's non-volatile, but it's much, much faster than the existing flash technology. We're talking about writing into a ReRAM is 1,000 times faster than writing into a flash. So now you have a very fast memory that's also non-volatile, and so it's much closer to the SRAM and DRAM in terms of speed.
So could you use it for both, or would you still use SRAM or DRAM for the memory and then use the new ReRAM for the storage? Or would you use it for both? So
first of all, ReRAM is good for both storage and what's called embedded, or some people call it integrated. So you can use it for both. It won't be replacing SRAM or DRAM, because each memory has its own features, and there's a limitation in how many times you can read and write into a non-volatile memory or into the ReRAM also. But there's definitely a strong need for non-volatile memory that sits on the chip next to the processor, and ReRAM is a great candidate for that, especially when you want to go down to the smaller geometries. Today, as far as I know, if you try to go down to 16 nanometers and below, no other non-volatile technology that I'm aware of can actually fit those advanced nodes, which are where the world is going to.
I mean, we have 7 nanometer processors.
Yeah, now the world is already at 7 nanometers.
So will people be using ReRAM primarily as a super fast version of their SSD, or will they be using it, paired with SRAM or DRAM, sitting in next to the processor, so that some of that memory that the computer's thinking about can be held there and be safe if the power goes out? I mean, what's the usage scenario for Weebit Nano ReRAM?
Well, I think actually both are very good potentials. We'll have to see how the market evolves, and sometimes things are there are always surprises. But in general, ReRAM can fit very well into the storage domain once we get bigger arrays, and it's a great candidate for the embedded, what we're calling it smart integration. The demands from the memory are changing dramatically. So, if in the past you had what's called the von Neumann architecture, where you have a big processor, a strong processor, it's doing all the job, the memory is there to basically serve it, and it reads and writes from the memory. The memory is kind of stupid, if you want to call it that way. Nowadays, people want the memories to be much smarter. There's a whole new domain called in-memory compute, where the memory actually does a lot of algorithms inside, because today when people want to compare, for example, a certain picture, a certain image with things that they have in the memory, they want the memory to do similarity analysis. So they want to send it over to the memory, and the memory will then compare it to all of the different entries and do all kinds of manipulation, etc., and basically return a simple answer if it exists in the memory or not, or whatever. So the memory is becoming much smarter now.
I mean, it sounds like it's a way to make machine learning even faster.
Definitely. Artificial intelligence needs much, much higher speed and a lot of memory. And here we're enabling much faster artificial intelligence.
I mean, just like people have upgraded from their traditional hard disks to SSDs, on SATA. Now we have memory NVMe directly on the PCIe bus, which is even faster still. But this would be even faster still, and it's the future, or one possible future for the types of storage that people are using today.
Yeah.
So how long before it's commercialized? This decade, next decade? I mean, we're close to the 2020s.
Well, the thing about semiconductor, and sometimes it frustrates the investors, but things take time. This is very delicate and complex technology. You know, just turning things around in the fab takes, you know, a couple of months easily, but just preparing it and all, you know, it takes many months. So we're in the process of productization already. We already started taking our megabit array and improving the different parameters. We announced, you know, good retention results recently. We're improving it so that it's at production level. And, you know, we'll be moving it to the 28 nanometer technology and to 300 millimeter wafers, so that we can move it to a production fab. You know, all of these things take a lot of time. So, you know, in reality, getting it ready for a production fab is going to take probably another year or so, and then moving it to production fab, even though we're silicon oxide, which makes life much easier, much simpler, still moving it to a production fab will take probably another year. So definitely, you know, to see, you know, real royalties and real revenues and all of that, it's probably going to take at least, you know, a couple of years. It'll be more in the 2021 type range.
Sure. And will it then be ready for use in the smartphones of that year or that era?
I hope so. You know, we're working hard on it.
And what sort of capacities are you targeting to start with?
So right now we have a megabit, and yeah, I think that the initial productization will be at the megabits level. So we'll see tens of megabits, or, you know.
But that means it wouldn't be, you wouldn't see it as the storage for your iPhone. It would be for the processor to embed.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be. We're focusing right now on the embedded, or what we call the smart integration of memory into a system on a chip, into an ASIC. Yeah.
Sure. And are you already working with the Qualcomms and the Intels and AMDs of the world, or is it too early for them yet?
Well, we've met many companies, you know, from the types that you've been mentioning. We've been talking also to manufacturing companies, to companies that manufacture equipment for the fabs, to EDA vendors, which are, they supply the tools that enable the designers to design with the ReRAM. So we've been talking to a lot of these guys and getting a lot of input. There's really a lot of partnership activity going on right now. And the goal is to get one of those guys to, you know, to make that next step and actually engage in developing a version of the memory for their designs. We're working on it now as we speak.
Sure. I mean, what's the short version of the competitive landscape in the memory world right now? You mustn't be the only company trying to create next generation memory.
Well, first of all, there are several types of next generation memories. I would say the three more common ones that people talk about are the PCM, which are things like Intel has been working on. There's magnetic RAM, or MRAM. A few companies are working on that. And then there's ReRAM, where again, there are a few players in that domain. Each one of these types of memories has specific advantages and disadvantages and fits specific applications. So all of them have justification. I mean, it's not like one of them will take over the world. Just like today, you have SRAM and DRAM and flash technology, etc. You're going to have several of these around. And even in the ReRAM domain, I think it's going to be so big, there will be room for several players. Obviously, we plan to be a dominant player there. We have been making much faster progress than any of the other companies, as far as we can see. In a very short amount of time, we've made great progress. Again, we're using standard material, silicon oxide, This is the stuff that people have been using for 50 years already in the semiconductor industry. All the machines, everything's been calibrated for this technology.
Yeah.
It's making life much easier for us.
Sure. And I remember a couple of years ago, HP started talking about Memristors, which was like a cross between memory and transistors. And I mean, can your technology be used in that space?
We're basically, kind of, if you want to call it a derivative of that, or, a descendant of that, that's basically the technology that they envisioned that we're now making progress on.
Sure. So what else should we know about Weebit Nano in 2018 and over the next couple of years, besides, that you want investors and this is going to be a winning technology?
Well, it's a great technology. I think we also have a great management team. One of the indications about just how exciting the company is when you look at our chairman, Dadi Perlmutter, who was basically number 2 at Intel, a very well-known guy in the industry. More recently this year, we brought on board Yoav Nissan-Cohen, who was actually a student of Dov Fruman. I'm sorry. Dov Fruman is the guy who invented non-volatile memories, and Yoav did his PhD there. And later on, he also on the business side made a lot of progress. He basically helped set up Tower Semiconductor and was the CEO there for 10 years. So we have these kinds of people on the board, and also on the Australian side, we have Fred Bard and Ashley Grongold on the board that are helping me a lot with everything that relates to the Australian market. So we have a really strong team. A CTO that's been Amir Regev, who's been around for many years in many memory companies. I think that's another very important piece of the puzzle. It's not only great technology, you have a great team, a lot of people who believe in the company.
So if we fast forward to 2028, I always like to look in the future. What do you think the memory market will look like then? How do you think the industry will have evolved over the next decade?
Oh, semiconductor, the semiconductor and in general, all of this high-tech world, 10 years ago, we just invented the smartphone. Look at where we are today. Who could have imagined 10 years ago that this is what we'll be doing? So it's really hard to predict. I mean, in general, I believe that, we'll see the emerging memories will not be emerging anymore. Sure. They will be the standard, Flash has been managing to keep alive for a long time, but I think in 10 years we'll start seeing it start trimming off. And I believe you'll see Weebit as a very big player in that market.
It won't be we at all, it'll be a big bit. So my second last question, I always like to ask you if you could please share some of the best advice you've received in life to help you get where you are today.
Oh, that's a good one. I think one of the key things that helped shape me was when I was a young engineer. I was actually already an engineering manager, a junior engineering manager. And in one of the meetings, my boss, when he was doing my review, he said, "Coby, you're a perfectionist. You keep working hard at making everything perfect. You need to learn to do things that are good enough and understand that in the marketplace, you can't do perfect. You just need to do when it's good enough. You need to release it and move on." And I think that made a big impact on me. And today I realized that you need to do something that's really good for the market, but it doesn't have to be perfect.
I mean, there's two sort of, you always have these sayings, and you can have one saying that can contradict another. In Australia they say, good enough is the enemy of good. But then they also say, don't wait for perfection, just start. I mean, just launch it and you can revise it afterwards. And
exactly.
So, you can't be seeking perfection all the time because you'll never reach it.
Exactly. So obviously you want to have the best memory, but you want to go out to the market as soon as you have a solution that's good enough for the customers. And we need to start bringing in revenue, and later on we can keep working on improving all the time.
So what's your final message to IT Wire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers, partners and investors?
Well, high tech, and you know, this whole semiconductor domain is really fascinating. I think you know, it's a domain that's worth following. Weebit, and not just Weebit, all these high tech companies and everything. I'm extremely excited about it, and you know, I'm definitely looking forward for the next few years with Weebit in this domain.
Well, Coby Hanoch, CEO of Weebit Nano Technologies, I'm looking forward to using ReRAM in my future devices, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.